G'day Bomber fans, it is Christmas come early. Anzac Day is coming up tomorrow. Massive game, massive occasion, it always is. It doesn't matter where either side is on the ladder. Anzac Day is the biggest game of the home and away season for all 18 teams really. It's sold out on the day of its release, I believe, and luckily for us we have two informed clubs going up against each other, fresh off big wins, both in the mix for finals early. It's going to be huge. This is a massive game. I can't remember a time Anzac Day has felt this big. It's a huge preview coming up for a huge occasion, but before we get into it, some votes from the Crows game to get through. Alrighty, so we both had Jai Caldwell getting the best on ground honours. The only real difference is the inclusion of Sam Durham in your votes and Nick Martin in mine. The role play was a tight count amongst the community. As of filming, Ben Hobbs has pipped Harry Jones by 1. I'll check again later in the week because it might have changed, but there were also players like Gresham and Cox right behind as well. The overall tally, Merritt leads, no surprise. Jai Caldwell is in second place, Durham third. Those two have been awesome lately. Ben Mackay is in the top 5 with Perkins, McGrath, Gresham and Dersman not too far behind, and Stringer and Jones round out a pretty even top 10 so far. Keep up the votes. Alrighty, so Essendon versus Collingwood, Anzac Day, crowd probably getting close to 100,000 again. Full capacity MCG, that is if the weather doesn't scare anyone off. There's a slight chance there's a bit of rain. Not too much, I don't think. No lightning like we saw on Easter Monday, but it might make the game a little scrappy if it comes, which I actually think could favour us for once. I'll get to that later, but the game is late afternoon, MCG, 7th place Bombers up against the 10th place Pies, but form means nothing here, and really history tells us that the Pies probably have the upper hand. They are not only the reigning premiers, but they are typically the winners in these Anzac Day matches. In fact, we have won 2 games since 2014, 2 Anzac Day games. The Pies are typically the better side, and if you're familiar with these games, you'll also know that for almost 2 decades, there has been a weird little pattern where we win one of these games every 4 years, and now our last 5 Anzac Day wins have come in 2005, 2009, 2013, 17, and 2021. So, weird pattern, but that doesn't really mean anything more than a cheeky little coincidence. We are well placed to break the pattern, but let's find out a bit about our opponent. How good are Collingwood? Are they as good as they were in 2023, or have they regressed? Well, based on current form, it's hard not to be a little bit scared of the Pies. They obviously started the season 0-3, looking like a shadow of the side they were just months earlier, but they bounced back with a win at the Gabba over the Lions, a close gather-round encounter win over Hawthorn, and most recently a genuine statement victory over Port Adelaide. That last game in particular is it's one that really shows us that the Pies could be back. They've won 3 games in a row, beaten some good teams in the process, and it's built off the back of serious pressure and serious drive like we know from them. They were 31 points down against Port Adelaide, ended up winning by 7 goals. It was a brutal display, and they weren't playing a bad team. They were playing the side that demolished us by 70-odd points just a few weeks ago. They were all over one of the best teams in the league. So let's talk a bit about what we can expect from Collingwood. Well, obviously pressure around the ball. We all know this by now, so I won't go into it too much, but they are back in this regard. They were faltering a bit to start the year, letting teams out of stoppages easier, and defence as well. But they look back, and it's a real worry. You look at their forward line in particular, Bobby Hill, Lockie Schultz, Beau McCreary, Jamie Elliott. You think if our forward pressure's been good off the back of Gresham and Davey and Stringer even, we have to really worry about what's coming our way with these guys, especially as we are a team who prides ourselves on our efficiency exiting D50. I think a big battle will actually be on opposite ends of the field with both forward lines trying to lock the ball in their forward half. I think we had 30 or more forward half intercepts on Friday against the Crows, but those numbers wouldn't be anything new to this Collingwood team. And of course, their drive from their defensive half, that is something that every team knows about. It's sometimes not even functional, but when you have a team that individually skilled across the board, it's so easy for them to create run out of nothing. They have carved teams up at their best. They've carved us up, and obviously we haven't been very good at defending it. Now, I should say that recently it's been a bit of a non-issue, but we haven't played good teams. We played a down-in-the-dumps Dogs and a poor Crows team. I look at that Sydney game as the one that we should be learning from because they killed us with their transition play. Port, not as much. That was more of a midfield masterclass, but I think if we are down defensively like we were against the Swans, we could easily concede a score like we saw against the Swans in excess of 20 goals. But even a little bit of rain would help with that. Hard to be clean with a water-soaked ball. If it does happen to be a wet game, we'll see a very contested game, and even if it isn't, we'll probably still see that. And it's hard to know who that even favours now because we have been one of the better clearance teams in the comp lately, albeit against some poorer sides. I'm still worried after what Port Adelaide did to us in round 4, but we have some gutsy players. Caldwell, Durham, Hobbs, Parrish. You got to wonder if those guys can compete with the likes of Jack Crisp and Tom Mitchell and Jordan De Goey, though, who's in ominous form right now. They are a very tough team in all areas, but a wet and scrappy game would at least keep the scoring down, I think, and make the game one about territory, which is where we would have to back ourselves in at the contest. Although I should say the weather could be anything. We shouldn't be praying for rain that may not come. It's just a possibility at this stage, one that would help us, I reckon. It also has to be noted that Collingwood are a team whose name is side by side in the dictionary with momentum. When this team gets on a run, it's near impossible to stop them. They play with such belief and dare, and it's really frustrating to watch as an opposition fan. They had a 12-goal turnaround against Port on the weekend, and as for us, we let the Crows back in a game they shouldn't have been a part of when they kicked 7 goals in a row. I think back to Anzac Day last year, we led by 5 goals at three-quarter time and ended up losing that match. You never really hold a safe lead when you're playing Collingwood, especially if you're a team like Essendon, who for some reason still can't put together genuine four-quarter performances consistently, at least. It doesn't matter if we play well for three quarters of the game. If we let the Pies dominate for even one, they could well win the match. And it might sound dramatic, but that's almost what happened with the Crows on Friday, who are a much, much worse team than Collingwood. I don't know how many of you guys watched the Port game, but they turned into a completely different team in the space of minutes. I think it's off the back of the crowd as well. When they start getting up and about that Collingwood chant, the players buy into it. And it's hard to like the Magpies, but you have to respect the way they go about it. It's really good, exciting footy built off pure belief, and that's why this game is so hard to win, because if Collingwood weren't back before, they will 100% be at their best on Anzac Day in front of almost 100,000 fans at the G. They're going to be hot. For us to win the game, I think our defence will have to be as solid as it's ever been. The back six I'm talking about. The team zone needs to shut down transitional footy, of course, that goes without saying, but our back six will be under the pump at times on Thursday. The ball's going to be down there, and the players feeding it in will be very good users like Dacos and Pendlebury and Sidebottom and DeGoey, and for the first time in a few weeks, our back six is actually looking quite tall. The Pies only really have Mychek up forward and one of Cox or Cameron, whoever is resting out of the ruck. McInnes might be used as the sub, but he could even be held by Mason Redmond because he's a bit undersized. It makes defending entries super important, and not just defending them, but not allowing them to drop to ground level in dangerous areas, because their small forwards are deadly. They will have the upper hand on ground level. So Mackay, Laverty, those taller backs, they need to back themselves into clunk or spoil outside of Crummer's range. And Martin, Kelly, McGrath, they need to be selfless and first things first shut down their direct opponent, because the Pies, as I've already said, have plenty of firepower on ground level. I think we will have them well and truly covered in the air. It's what happens from there that I'm worried about. Now, we may have them in the air down back, but I think we should be really excited about our forward line height as well, because P.O.T.Y is obviously back. Jones is playing good footy. Langford and Stringer are in and around the top 10 for the Coleman. There are plenty of worries for Collingwood's defence, which I will say has probably been their biggest weakness in 2024. Nathan Murphy is a massive loss, and it shows. Frampton is serviceable, but he will have to lock down right, and from there Moore will have to be accountable, because Jones has been hitting the scoreboard more and more unless those two switch. There is a chance either Stringer or Langford, or even Jones, depending on how rotations go, get a matchup that they have the upper hand in. So it's important that we highlight those 60-40 one-on-ones and try to get the ball in areas for our benefit. Let's talk team news, because I genuinely think this is a game that can be won at the selection table. Peter Wright walks back into the team, but who comes out? Scott has already said the out-of-form Draper will stay put. Jones surely won't come out of the side. Could we rest Goldstein? But then what happens the week after? It seems a short-term fix resting Goldstein. This is a fascinating selection, because we can't deal with Collingwood on ground level in a potentially wet game if we have a side as tall as it could be. Can we justifiably replace, let's say, Nick Hind with Peter Wright against the Collingwood team that isn't that tall to begin with? The squad selection meeting will be a long one, because we're in such good form across the board. There could be some really unlucky tall players or some really strange choices made by the coaches. And of course, Dylan Shield, I think he returns probably as a sub. You would think the 5-day break for someone who hasn't played in ages would be tough on the body with a full game. So I think he replaces Sartas as the sub. I know some will want Draper and Parrish dropped. I've seen it in the news a bit lately, but these are proven big game players. I'd personally be very annoyed to see them omitted. And also, Guelphy is labelled as a test. I'm not sure if Scott will rush him back with Davey providing good pressure as it is. Gut feeling is he spends the weekend preparing in the VFL and comes in for the Eagles game. As for Collingwood, they should be unchanged unless a late injury occurs. I think Markov probably comes into the side in favour of McInnes as the sub, just for some added speed and experience in a big game. Look, we can win this game. There's no doubt about it. We're well placed to cause an upset, but I just look at Collingwood. This is a team that doesn't have one specific way to win a game of footy. They look like they're back now. That Port match was hard to watch as an Essendon fan. They beat up the team that embarrassed us a few weeks ago. I think if Collingwood are at their very best, we probably lose. They are simply ahead of us as a list, and you'd be pretty silly to suggest otherwise. I don't like to look at form for games this big. This isn't your average home or away game, and even looking at form, Collingwood are playing better, in my opinion. My heart is saying we can cause an upset and make a statement, but my head is saying the Pies are the better team, much more experienced in games this big. Sure, there there is every chance they come out looking like they did in round 1 or 2, we can scare them, but I just think they are the better side than we are right now. I'm going to predict them to win by 10 points. There are more ways for them to win this game than us. Even if we're playing at our best, they can still win the thing. That's what I'm worried about. So Pies by 10, but gee, I would love an upset. How good would a win be to really kickstart our season? It's a tough year to make finals, but a win here would really set us up for a spot in September. That is all. Huge game coming up. It's more than just a footy game. This feels like the grand final of the home and away season. Let's hope the boys are up for it. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, leave your predictions in the comments below, and go Bombers.